So welcome, all of you, to today's session of our Climate Colloquy series. And the topic is Climate Emergency, Responding with Power and Light. As a reminder, our theme for this cycle through June of 2024 is Climate Action, Restoring Right Relationships. And from Doctrine and Covenants, the restoring of persons to healthy or righteous relationships with God, others, themselves, and the earth is at the heart of the purpose of your journey as a people of faith. Now, these inspired words redirect and expand our traditional understanding of restoration. It's no longer simply a restoration of first century institutional forms, but a restoration of right relationship with all creation, all beings, all of Earth's beauty and function. And the declaration of a climate emergency at April's World Conference further defines our faith journey as a call to action. We're given daily reminders of the fierce urgency of that call, to apply Martin Luther King's phrase. We experience it in the news and in our own places where we live. In our first session this season, on October 1st, members of our presiding bishopric demonstrated the World Church's commitment to acting on this call. And that webinar is also now available on our website. Today, we begin to provide information and resources that will allow you and your church communities to, as a body, to take concrete action in this climate emergency, to respond with power and light. Our presenter is Sarah Paulos from Interfaith Power and Light. I'll refer to it as IPL. Is a national faith-based organization in the United States acting to encourage faith communities to act on climate with state and multi-state affiliates around the country. And there are similar organizations in other countries. For example, Faith in the Common Good in Canada and Eco Church in the British Isles. Sarah is the Community Engagement and Programs Manager for Interfaith Power and Light. And she was awakened to climate action with the proposal to build a huge coal-fired power plant in her community in Iowa. Her response was to create the Cool Congregations program to help members of her home congregation reduce their energy use and care for our common home. Cool Congregations is now a program of IPL. And prior to IPL, Sarah served for 12 years as the program and outreach coordinator for Iowa IPL. 12 years as the program and outreach coordinator for IPL, training green teams in Iowa and 16 other states to conduct the Cool Congregations program. She developed additional educational programs, including Food, Faith, Climate, Connecting the Dots, The Good Life Redefined, addressing how our stuff contributes to climate change, Faith for Energy Equity on environmental justice, and Common Good on advocacy. Now, while Sarah is presenting, please use the chat box to post any questions that come to mind. You can direct them to me, Dean White, and we'll go through as many as possible among them in our Q&A and discussion period following. And now I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Dean. Appreciate that introduction. And yes, I'm the program director for Interfaith Power and Light. Interfaith Power and Light inspires and mobilizes people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on climate change. We work with individuals and faith communities of all major faith traditions across the United States. We work in all 50 states and U.S. territories with a broad national network of state and regional level affiliates. And today, I was going to encourage you to consider setting a goal for reducing emissions from your denomination's buildings and share an example of how others are carrying out this work. I'll share IPL resources, including our page on the new federal funding for congregations to reduce emissions. And I'll share stories of IPL congregations that will inspire you to engage in this work. And first, I want to start by saying congratulations to you on passing a resolution declaring a climate emergency. It truly is an emergency, with people around the world suffering from the impacts of climate change, losing their homes, their livelihoods, even their lives from the effects of drought, wildfire, flood, and extreme weather of all kinds due to climate change. And now that you have acknowledged this emergency, the next step is taking action to reduce your contribution to climate change, reduce your use of fossil fuels and the carbon emissions from that activity. So what can one person do? If one person, could you go back, please? Rod, thank you. We'll stay right here on this slide for a minute. If one person acts to curb their emissions, it becomes an example for other people to follow, and that is awesome. If we all do it, then our collective actions can have a significant impact on reducing our combined footprint. Many denominations in the United States are passing resolutions to be zero emissions by 2030 or 2050. The list includes the Presbyterians, who were the first to do it in 2006, also the Episcopal Church in the United States, the ELCA, the Lutherans, the United Methodist Church, Disciples of Christ, and many others. And the Church of England has set a similar goal. So since you've already passed a climate emergency resolution, I encourage you to think about passing another resolution next time around for your denomination for all facilities to be carbon-free by a set date. These resolutions have an impact as congregations from these denominations that I listed above are actually going carbon-free, moving away from fossil fuels entirely, and setting an example for others in their communities. And now a word about carbon offsets. It's entirely possible to ditch fossil fuels to heat, cool, and power our buildings by using heat pumps and renewable energy. So we don't need to purchase carbon offsets to get our buildings to zero emissions. In fact, it's a distraction from doing the real work of reducing our own carbon footprint to zero. So when you go to write your resolution, I would encourage you not to include the option of carbon offsets in your resolution for your denomination's buildings. Now, these denominations that have passed resolutions to be carbon-free are making plans to achieve that goal, and I'm going to tell you the story of one of them right now. So let's go to the next slide, Rod. The Episcopal Diocese of Northern California, a regional group from the National Episcopal Church, passed a resolution to carry out the directive passed down from the national body for all buildings to be carbon-free by 2030. A small group of dedicated individuals formed a diocesan-wide green team called the Commission on the Environment to pass the resolution and help their congregations meet the goal. And they are bringing them together to learn the process and share resources. They are still in the early stages, but they have made great progress. First, they taught their congregations how to form a green team to carry out the work of getting to zero emissions. And they asked that each congregation form their own green team. And then they taught them the process each green team needed to follow. The first step that they taught them was to assess their buildings in two ways. First, measure a baseline of the carbon footprint of their buildings so they can check their progress toward their goal. And they did that using IPL resources. And the second way to assess their buildings is to get a professional on-site energy audit. Someone who comes and examines the building and suggests actions the congregation should take to cut their energy use. And 20 of their congregations have already completed this step. And the next step is for each congregation to write up a plan of action. What suggested actions to take first, how to finance it, and who will do it. They're working on this now. Their diocesan green team is determined to help them find funding to assist with their projects. They have 7 years to complete their projects to reach the goal by 2030. And the final step after they've completed their project is to educate others with their example. IPL resources will help them do that. Here's an example. Let's go to the next slide. The first congregation in their diocese to get to zero emissions was St. Martin's Episcopal Church in Davis, California. They went all electric, replacing their gas heating and cooling system with heat pumps powered by on-site solar. Their achievement actually inspired the diocese to form that green team I was telling you about, the Commission on the Environment, and to set the goal of zero emissions by 2030. IPL certified them as a cool congregation at the 100% reduction level. That means zero emissions, and featured them during Climate Week, New York City, a couple years ago. And their story has been shared widely in media outlets, and now IPL is partnering to have a film of their accomplishments shown at the upcoming World Climate Talks at COP28. So you see, it just takes one example to get the ball rolling. Now let's go to the next slide. Some congregations are taking it a step further and adding backup batteries to their solar systems so that they can keep the lights on during power outages, providing a refuge for people in their communities during extreme weather events such as wildfires and floods. These resiliency hubs, as they are called, allow people to charge their phones and plug in their oxygen tanks, store their medicines in the refrigerator and keep cool during extreme heat events, and sometimes even stay overnight. Often advanced air filtration systems are part of it to provide safe air to breathe during a wildfire event. And Hope United Methodist Church in South San Francisco, pictured on this slide, is a resiliency hub for their community. Plus, they expect to save $80,000 in electricity costs over the life of their solar system. So let's go to the next slide. Interfaith Power and Light offers resources to congregations to cut their emissions through the Cool Congregations program. Let's go to the next slide. There's a startup guide available for free download that includes how to start a green team to carry out the work, tips for reducing energy, and more. And the next slide, we also have 2 carbon emissions trackers, one for congregational facilities and one for households. Now, these calculators were designed by a leading scientist in the field of carbon emissions tracking, Dr. Chris Jones. He's the director of the Cool Climate Network at the University of California at Berkeley. And some of you may have seen the Cool Climate Network tools before. And this one has been shaped especially for congregational facilities. And this is what the Diocese of Northern California of the Episcopal Church used to create the bench line for their all of their congregations, so they can measure their progress as they proceed with their work. And if you go to the next slide, we also have a household tracker. So individuals or households can go here and get an estimate of your carbon footprint. And this tracker includes a really great list of suggestions for action to reduce your emissions at home. So if you have a US address, I realize you're not all from the United States, but you need a US zip code to be able to use these tools. If you just want to play around with the tools, by all means, put in a US zip code, even if you live in Canada, and play around with the tool and see what it does for you. So let's go to the next slide. IPL has 2 programs to acknowledge congregations that have achieved success in reducing their impact on the environment. This is one of our recent certified congregations in Kula, Hawaii. Their green team is actually led by that high school student in the picture. So the Cool Congregations certification recognizes congregations that have reduced their emissions by making permanent changes to their facilities to save energy. We just look at the use of gas and electric for the certification program. And gas and electric could include propane or other fossil fuels that are used at the facility. And reductions of just 10% or more qualify. And we award certifications for reductions up to 100%. And this year, we're now up to 7 congregations that have been certified at the 100% reduction level, meaning there are 0 emissions. And the next slide, please. Woods Memorial Presbyterian Church in Severna Park, Maryland, is one of dozens of certified Cool congregations. They carefully planned their energy equipment upgrades to gradually reduce energy use by over 50%, and they are saving $35,000 a year in energy costs, and they do not have solar. So that's a huge accomplishment just in improving the building. And the other recognition program we have, let's go to the next slide, is an annual contest that awards cash prizes to congregations working to become sustainable leaders in their communities, called the Cool Congregations Challenge. And together, the 150 entries who entered last year and were awarded this year are preventing over 1,300 tons of carbon emissions annually. And the deadline to apply is coming up in about a month. It's December 15th, and $1,000 goes to the top winner, and $500 goes to 3 runners-up in each category. And there's 6 categories in the contest. Next slide, please. The Energy Saver is for congregations who have completed projects to save energy, such as installing installation, weatherization, new windows and doors, heating and cooling systems. And Ascension Lutheran Church in Burlington, Vermont, won this award last year for their courageous years-long upgrade project that cut their facility's carbon emissions by 60%. They upgraded their lighting, heating, cooling, and ventilation systems. They insulated the buildings, and they're purchasing solar from a community solar farm nearby. The next slide, please. This category is called the Renewable Role Model category. It covers solar, geothermal, wind, or solar water heating. St. Anthony Catholic Parish won the Renewable Role Model Award for the work of their Small Creation Care, or Laudato Si committee, that convinced the parish to install solar, and then influenced the diocesan attitude by inviting the bishop to attend the solar installation blessing. Then, with the support of the bishop's office, a small group of clergy and local members then came together to create a creation care committee for the entire diocese and a multi-year climate action plan for the diocese, serving 100 plus churches in California. So one church can make a big difference. The next slide, please. And the Cool Planner category, that's for congregations that have completed energy audits and created plans, including a fundraising plan to conduct energy-saving activity at their congregational facility. And People's Church of Kalamazoo, Michigan, won this award for their ambitious plan to cut their building's carbon footprint to 0 by 2030 through energy efficiency measures and installing solar panels. They have already cut their energy use by 20% and have well-laid plans to have an all-electric building to reach their goal of 100% reduction. And the next slide. We're working our way through the categories. This is the electric vehicle leader category. This is our newest category for educating and advocating for the adoption of electric vehicles, installing EV charging stations, and community outreach. St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Indianapolis, Indiana, won for their work to encourage the adoption of electric vehicles with their EV demo day that drew hundreds of visitors and inspired the city of Indianapolis to host their own EV demo day. And the next slide, this category is called community inspiration. This is for congregations that inspire congregants to save energy at home. And it also includes congregations helping their communities transition from fossil fuels to clean energy and become more resilient and prepare for the impacts of climate change. And this is a couple of pictures put together of Tabernacle Baptist Church in Dermott, Arkansas. They won the runner-up in this category for educating members how to offset utility costs by using energy-efficient light bulbs and power strips and weatherization to lower electric bills. So this church is handing out approximately 4,000 LED bulbs per year at their food bank, saving 77 tons of carbon emissions annually just from those light bulbs. And the next category is sacred grounds. This category covers native landscaping, organic gardening, water conservation, wildlife habitats. Grace Church in the Mountains in Waynesville, North Carolina, won for transforming a traditional church lawn into a wildlife haven with native plants, pollinator and wildlife certifications, an outdoor worship space, and a classroom for lessons on the natural world. They also have an organic vegetable garden serving their food pantry. So that's the last category I was going to tell you about. I hope you're inspired by all of these examples. The contest deadline is in 1 month, December 15th. So if your congregation has completed a project for any of these categories, consider applying. Unfortunately, it's for U.S. congregations only. We have not yet expanded beyond our own country. But those of you in the U.S., please consider applying. Projects completed in the last 3 years qualify. And now I wanted to share some more about the Inflation Reduction Act. So if we could go to the next slide. You know, the Inflation Reduction Act is the greatest investment in climate care provisions in United States history. And this legislation put the nation on the path to cut emissions by 44% by 2030. It includes incentives for solar, wind, geothermal, EVs, and much more. And for the very first time, nonprofit organizations such as congregations and houses of worship qualify for federal funding to make these energy upgrades. It's equal to a discount of 30% to even 60% or more for qualifying projects. And so IPL has been hosting a series of webinars with our partnering religious organizations featuring experts in the field on these IRA provisions to help congregations get connected with these funds for their projects. Next slide, please. The Solar Financing for Congregations webinar featured a nonprofit solar financing company called Revolve that offers a way to put up solar panels at no upfront costs. An excellent overview of the IRA provisions with the Department of Energy, featured a message from Energy Secretary Granholm. And holy heat pumps, that's the last one we had. They are an important way to heat and cool your buildings. Heat pumps are, that will get you to zero, combined with renewable electrons. And we covered how to fund them, featuring John Doe from the Department of Energy. So let's go to the next slide, please. I just wanted to point out that you can find the links to all of our webinars there that are recorded, and more information also on IPL's federal funding energy page, resource page, federal energy funding resource page. So the other page I wanted to tell you about, next slide, please, is our new solar resource page, including how to finance your solar, find a solar installer, and testimonial videos of congregations that have already gone solar and are planning to use the IRA funding to help pay for their installations. There's a good explanation on the how to finance your solar page of the IRA funding and how to access that, as well as a good list of denominational sources of loans or grants that can help fund solar on your building. So let's go to the next slide. On that solar resource page, we also have a map and directory of over 1,200 congregations with solar. So if you want to find a congregation with solar, that's in your area to go visit them or call them and ask them, how did you do that? You can find them on this map here. So in closing, I'm just going to say together, taking practical steps to reduce our energy use and carbon footprint, we can care for our sacred earth for the sake of future generations. So for more information, you can contact me at programs@interfaithpowerandlight.org. And our main website is interfaithpowerandlight.org. And from there, you can access the program Cool Congregations, which has its own website. So I just want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions, because that's usually the most important part of these presentations. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Dean.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to hand it off to Lori briefly for a brief practice, and then we'll get into questions.
So I'd like us to begin, and we will end with gratitude. I don't have a bell. So when I do this, this will be this place where first we offer our gratefulness to Sarah and to all of those many people who have contributed such amazing amounts of time and energy and passion to reducing carbon footprints and seeking for faith congregations to become a major part of changing the future of the world. So as we begin with gratitude, I want to invite you for a few moments to simply rest and breathe with what you've heard. Find the ground with the soles of your feet, recognizing that we are bodies seeking to care for this planet, that we are bodies breathing and listening. So listening for a few moments to the noises, gentle or less so, around you. Opening your awareness to spirit even further. Grounded through the soles of your feet and through the aware, listening, looking part of who you are, to move into the heart. Just for a few minutes to rest, to remember, to review what has been offered. And as you remember, not needing to remember every detail, but looking for something that wants your attention. That maybe beckons to you. Is this possible for me? Is this possible for my congregation, my mission center? Spending these moments resting and listening, not for the hugeness of it all, but the next step forward that might be tugging at your heart. What's stirring in you? Possibility of a resolution for zero emissions. Maybe just the words green team. Resiliency. Is there a resource that Sarah mentioned that you're intrigued by? school congregations. What do you want to know more about? What questions would you like to ask? Letting spirit stir in you in a unique way. What draws your heart forward in response? Resting and breathing in this little bit of liminal space between talk and questions. I would close with a sense of gratitude for the earth herself, for all of the plants and animals and humans in relationship with each other, for our values around the sacredness of creation, for the desire that brought each of you here today, weaving a network, a web, for finding actions that will move us into the future, honoring who we are, who you are, but most of all, loving this earth. We say thank you to her for all that she gives us. Amen.
Thank you, Lori. There have been a few questions that have been posted in the chat, some of which I think members of our team have tried to answer. And I've also posted both the name of the Canadian organization that someone had a question about, as well as the URL for Interfaith Power and Light, which once you go there, I'm sure you'll be able to find the additional pages that Sarah referenced. And I know people have a number of comments that they have made just about sort of the condition that we're facing. I'm wondering what questions people have for Sarah regarding the work that IPL does and what she has given us information about today. And if you could just raise your hand with the reactions button, we'll be looking for you. But raising your hand with that button actually moves you to the first screen. So it's a lot easier to find you that way. And other members of the team will be watching as well. What questions do people have? And then we'll have an opportunity to have some discussion about what you all are thinking about doing or what you've been doing going forward. So I'm going to pose a question, Sarah, to you that I noticed in your bio that you sent me. You were pulled into this effort, I would say, because of a coal-fired power plant that you made aware of in Waterloo, Iowa. Is that right? Can you just share that experience? I think, understanding what it is that grabs us and pulls us into caring work is always a helpful account.
Sure, I'd be happy to share that story. Yes, a huge 750 megawatt coal-fired power plant was proposed for Waterloo, Iowa. At the time, I lived in Cedar Falls, which is neighboring to Waterloo. And I knew that Waterloo already had the highest asthma rate in the state, and that the emissions from coal-fired power plants can trigger asthma attacks. And of course, the neighborhoods where these asthma rates were the highest were in the low-income communities right near where the coal plant was going to be. And of course, a lot of people of color lived there. And so just the bells all went off in my head. This is so unjust. And then, I was talking about it with other women at my congregation. And one of them said, well, I have 4 kids who have asthma. And so she joined in on this as well. And another woman was a local business owner. Her husband had a restaurant. She had a coffee shop. She said, this is going to be really bad for business to be near this huge source of pollution. So she joined in on the fight. And people gradually started joining in for all of their different reasons. And together we were all protesting the coal plant, but I didn't feel like that was my strength to go stand on street corners with signs that said no coal. And so when my neighbor came over one day, he saw the no coal plant sign in my yard, and he said, they're building that coal plant to meet increased consumer demand. So if you really want to do something, you'll decrease your use of electricity. And I thought, well, that seems to make a lot of sense. And so I worked on it in my own house. My girlfriends and I worked on it at our houses, and then we decided to put it together as a program to help all the members of our congregation do it. Because our faith leader had long been teaching us that to keep the faith, we need to keep the earth. And so we kind of put all those things together. And we asked people to reduce their energy use at home as an act of faith. And we asked them to aim for 10%, like a traditional tithe. Only this time it would be a tithe to the earth. So that's how we put our reasoning together. And when we presented it to the congregation, 30% of the congregation signed on the first Sunday that we presented the idea. And it was very exciting. Very exciting to see the interest level among the people. And we asked them, what do you want to learn about? What measures do you want to learn about? And they responded with a list of things, and alternative vehicles was at the top. So we had a Sunday education session where this guy in our congregation, who is a car salesman, brought a Prius and parked it on the lot and let people sit in it, drive around the parking lot. And sure enough, we came away with 3 new Prius owners in the congregation as a result of that Sunday education, which really cut the emissions, the transportation emissions of those 3 families drastically. Because those cars get like 50 miles an hour, 50 miles a gallon. I mean, anyway, so that's how it got started in my own home congregation. We created a tool to measure our footprints with the assistance of a John Deere engineer who was a member of our congregation. So we were able to measure people's carbon footprints before and after, and at the end of the year, we came away with a 9.5% average reduction from each of the 30 families who took part. And so based on that success, we got requests from congregations all over the state of Iowa wanting to know how to do this. And so we started driving around the state, hired babysitters, packed the station wagon, drove around the state. And by the time I'd been there 12 years doing this, about 350 congregations had these training sessions on how to do this kind of program. So there's quite a bit of interest out there, as you probably already know from your own congregations. It's just a matter of making it workable, making it doable for people to be able to work on this. And I want to talk about one other thing while I have the floor here. Many of you may have really small congregations, but some of them may be in Iowa. I saw someone on your call from Iowa. And if you're in a territory for Mid-American, for instance, they have a goal to get all of their electricity from renewables in the next couple of decades. I think it's by 2045 or something. And so if you have a congregation that has Mid-American providing your electricity, I don't think you need to work so hard on getting solar on your roof. Instead, you need to work on going all electric by getting your heating and cooling system turned over to electric by using heat pumps so that you don't have to fund both heat pumps and solar. If somebody's already going to start providing you renewable electrons, your part of the game is heat pumps. So same as if you're like down by Kelowna, Iowa, and your electric provider is a little rural electric cooperative that has community solar that you can buy into at a price that's lower than getting electricity from other sources. So I just wanted to offer that comment to show you that this task doesn't have to be overwhelming, that it's actually doable, even for smaller congregations. So I'm just going to turn it back over to you, Dean.
Thank you. Well, you anticipated one of the questions we've had in the chat. The second part of that questioner's question was, what experience have you had or advice do you have about reaching out to non-attending young adults and teens to be part of a green team? I think, we all in the mainstream denominations have experienced the aging of our congregations, and but we know that the future that is being faced is most important to younger people. And so what's been your experience, or what advice do you have about engaging young adults in the efforts to make these changes?
Well, I don't know what to say about non-attending, because if they're not coming within the realm of your communications, I'm not sure you're going to reach them. But I know that when we started the Cool Congregations program at my home congregation in Cedar Falls, Iowa, we had young families that heard about what we were doing and attended our church to learn more about it. And I can specifically remember being there one Sunday when, everybody lines up to shake the hand of the faith leader, right, on their way out of the sanctuary. Well, this young man, the father of this young family who had attended that day, he went around that. He wasn't interested in that. He went right to our Cool Congregation sign-up table. That's why he was there. So, if you get people in the door, or if word gets out that you are doing this kind of programming, this shows a concern for younger generations, for their well-being, for the future, for their children, that will bring them in the door. And the picture I showed you of that congregation in Hawaii that was certified, that was a high school student who was leading their green team. So if you find a young person in your congregation who's interested in this, by all means, give them a leadership role and support them in having that leadership role.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of goes to another question, which is, what advice do you have about the way to start the process of setting up a green team? I think your experience in Waterloo or Cedar Falls was really forming a green team in a way, just by pulling folks in with a common interest. What's your advice about how to go about setting up a green team in a congregation?
Well, finding the people to be part of it is key. So talking to your faith leader, talking to your governing, I assume you have some kind of a lay governing board also for each of your congregations, and telling them what you want to do and asking them for names of people who they think might be interested is always a good way to begin. And if you're talking about making changes to your facility, you need to have your facilities volunteer on this committee, because they often know more about the building than anybody else. And I think it's also handy to have somebody who's knowledgeable about the finances of the congregation. Mm-hmm. And as well as someone who is good at communicating with the congregation, so they can tell the story of what you are doing, because that is key in garnering support going forward. And all of that said, look at the startup guide for good advice on how to write a mission statement, because that's another really important thing for you to do as starting a green team. Make sure you've got a mission statement and goals that are approved by the powers that be in your congregation. And once you've got these things, host a film about the topic of climate change or climate solutions, and see who comes to your film. and make an announcement about your newly forming green team and what your mission is and your goals are, and see if anybody wants to join your green team. So
Have
that's
Yeah, thank you. Have you had experience with congregations where there's a resistance on the part of leadership to these kinds of activities, and how that can be managed or overcome?
yeah, that's difficult if the leaders of your congregation are sorry, the sun's coming in the window. It's making it all faded out here. That's difficult if your leadership is not on board. And so you got to find the people who attend your congregation who are on board, and see if you can make a presentation to your leadership. I mean, the bishop of the diocese in California, remember I showed you the picture of that Catholic congregation that won the Renewable Role Model? He was not on board at all. In fact, the leadership of that little Catholic congregation was not on board. And so it took them probably 3 years to convince their own congregation to do it. And they leaned a lot on the argument about how much money it was going to save the congregation to put solar up. And after that, when it was going to be put up, they invited the bishop, and that totally changed his mind. He saw firsthand the solar panels going up, how cool they are, how much money it was going to save that particular congregation. So maybe that's a route you can go with reluctant leadership if they're not going to listen to the tenets of your own faith as to why we care for the earth and why it's important to do what we can to reduce our emissions. I mean, that's a sad story right there. But maybe they'll listen to the financial story about how it's really going to, help the budget to cut emissions.
A lot of our congregations, or some anyway, meet in leased facilities. Have you had any experience or aware of any where a congregation is needing to approach a private owner or some other organization that owns the building?
I don't have firsthand experience with that, but it would be a great outreach for a congregation to go to the owner of the building and say, hey, as people of faith, this is what our faith calls us to do. Can you help us? Are you interested?
Great. I see, Dar, is that you? You've got your hand up. Or Claire. Is it Claire?
Claire and Goba have their hand up right now.
Yeah, it's me. Dar's my nephew. I know all this information you gave us tonight is based on US. And of course, I'm in Northern Ontario, and it's a little cold here, and we have winters, and it's entirely different than in some areas in like California. And I was wondering if you had some statistics as to the payback for putting in solar panels from the real world, so that we could use that as some kind of evidence that it is a definite payback, and over a period of time, costs could be recovered, and of course, energy would be saved. So I just wondered if you had any statistics.
Well, it really depends on the financing and also what your local utility is charging you for your electricity. So, and also, I'm not sure how far north you are and what the solar gain is in your area. So I'm sure it depends on that too.
Well, right now we have 2 inches of snow and it's 8 below zero.
Oh God, that's cold.
So
Yeah, we already had snow this year here in Bozeman, Montana, but it's melted. And now it's unseasonably warm. It's been 50 degrees all week, which is scarier to me than snow. But yeah, I would definitely talk to a solar installer in your area to see if they can, and make sure they serve the area that is served by your utility who provides your electricity, so that they can give you a real world example of how that might work or not work. But in terms of heat pumps, I know geothermal is what people in Minnesota do, and here too. geothermal heat pumps that work really well in very cold temperatures.
Okay, thank you.
Goba, our friend from Liberia, you have your hand up.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the information. They're very valuable information. I just got a couple of questions that I want to ask. Can you all hear me, please?
Pardon me?
Yes?
Yes, we can hear
Can you
you.
hear me, please? Okay, good. My first question to Sarah will be, I was hoping that you could expand on the link between faith and climate change. I'm not sure I heard a lot about that. Yeah, how do you build a link between faith and climate change or the impact? Because if you may want to go out into the community and you may be asked the question, what have my faith to do with this and all of that? So you could help us to build more links. I gotta see, should I ask all my questions? Then you can go there one by one, or you want to take them one on one?
Let's take
I
that
got
one.
serious of them.
Yeah, let's
Okay,
do
let's
that.
take it one by one.
Yeah. Sarah?
Great. Yeah. In the beginning, when I first started doing cool congregations at my home congregation, people would come up to me and say, why are we talking about light bulbs in church? They just had no clue whatsoever. And so that means we have to backtrack and go back and look at what our particular faith tradition has to say about caring for the earth and make sure people understand that. There's a real lack of information there in a lot of people's brains. And so going back and looking at your religious tradition and finding what they have to say in the Bible or whatever your book of text is about caring for the earth, that's really important. I mean, you can't sidestep that. That has to be the first step. And then educating about climate change. If your faith tradition calls you to care for your neighbors, as most of the world's major traditions do, then you need to make the connection. This is how climate change is impacting our neighbors at home and around the world. And we are called to care for our neighbors. And that means we have to do what we can to reduce our contribution to carbon emissions, which cause climate change, which cause these impacts that are causing my neighbor to lose their livelihood. So you kind of have to explain all of the dots, connect all of the dots all along the way.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. I got the picture.
Yeah.
My second question is, when you started to name some of the churches that have started this joining of
Oops, is he
Goba, I think we lost your sound. Or maybe your connection. Well, let's see if Goba can get reconnected, and we'll come back to him. Are there other questions people have they'd like to ask of Sarah? I think everybody must be convinced. Goba, are you there? No. I think maybe it's time to switch from putting you on the spot, Sarah, to seeing what has moved people who are here in this webinar to think about, to do, to act upon. Rod, there's a slide with some questions that we might ask people to contemplate. And so, as you've listened today, can you share with us, if you feel you're inclined, what is your church community doing to address the climate emergency? I think we all learn from each other, and it would be wonderful to hear what things are going on in your particular local or regional community of the church. Or what are you contemplating doing? What are the things that you may be on the table for discussion and they're not yet decided upon? And then what's been stimulated by the presentation we had today to consider that you hadn't necessarily thought about or brought up in your community, in your congregation? Something for you to consider or for you personally to propose to leadership in your congregation. And so I'm going to start. I see Mike, you've got your hand raised in Germany. What do you have?
Yes, I have less of an answer to the questions you've put up there.
Okay.
But I could say that the youth in Germany are becoming very involved in fighting climate change. And they're writing articles for our newsletter in Germany and beginning to talk about what you can do at home and also in church activities. The idea that has gone through my head, because I'm rather a newbie to this group of people. I think I've only been here 3 times, and so everything is new to me. But every time I've been here, I've come back with ideas and input that you have given me. And I was just thinking of how could you, and maybe more in the United States because Germany is a bit different, but how could you increase your actions in the United States? And I mean not by actions of what you do, but of getting to people. I could imagine like having every congregation that would be interested in this, to have like a representative of every congregation come to these meetings. That would certainly have a big impact on the congregations in the church. Maybe using resources in the World Church, if that's possible, to say, send someone from Florida or from the Independence area or whatever, and just have them listen into this and see what they can bring back to their congregation. I think that might be a big moving factor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our team will definitely chew on that suggestion in our next series of meetings. Other comments? What are
Should we check with Goba to see if he got back?
now, Goba, are you there yet? Yep. Any other things any of you would like to share? Claudia.
This is so timely. I just have to share a little news of hope. Yesterday at our Mission Center conference, one of our young adults brought a resolution to gather data and see how we could reduce the carbon footprint at Mission Center activities. Now, she began by kind of focusing on the use of animal products, but the group, the people at the conference said, no, we want to look at it all. And so a study committee has been formed with a deadline of this whole year to gather data and gather ways that that we as a group can do it. And I just thought, wow, that just is like hand in glove with what you're talking about. And so so proud of her stepping forward. And she did it in response to the World Conference Climate Emergency Resolution. She's very, very aware.
Thank you. And keep us posted on how that goes, would you?
Sure.
And Sarah mentions that the Cool Congregations calculator also measures food and the use of food in its calculation of carbon use. Dennis, you have your hand up.
What film did Sarah like to use for climate change?
Good question. Are there some films, Sarah, that you think would be good films for people to watch?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of good films out there. We have so many. And IPL generally arranges for free screening rights for congregations to show films to your congregation. Those screening rights are usually valued at like $90. So we usually try to arrange the free screening rights, and we have a bunch of films listed on our website, the Interfaith Power and Light website. Just trying to pick out a favorite one. This last spring, we showed a series of 3 films. Oh, I gotta go look up their name. Can I get back to you on that? I'll go look it up. They were
Absolutely.
really great films. They were each like about 30 minutes in length, so they were good for hosting discussion. And the first one is like an argument about why solar. And then it moves forward in time from there to the clean energy transition, what we need to do to transition to clean energy society-wide. So I'll go look it up and put it in the chat, okay?
That's great. Scott mentions that he likes the idea of establishing green teams at the mission center level to help congregations get rolling, which I think is a great idea as well. And Dorothy or Dennis Ware mentioned that they've had about 20 people meeting in their church for less than a couple hours a week. They're looking at selling their building and renting. And as a part of that discussion, I assume you're weighing the relationship of those decisions to climate. Can you comment on that anymore? I don't see you on the screen. And Claudia, who we just heard from, mentions that she'll be sure to connect her to the IPL resources in Iowa. That's the young woman who's been raising the issues in her congregation. That's terrific. I want to mention that, there are various areas within the Community of Christ where there's a lot of activity going on. Michigan USA Mission Center, the leadership of the Mission Center has been involved in a number of activities. The East Lansing congregation also has formed a green team, and they've sort of spun off into different topics in that green team to explore things they can do, and among other things, becoming more aware and involved in issues of water, which, as we know, in Michigan, in various communities, has become a very challenging issue. In the Detroit area, as has been the case with many of our congregations in urban areas, they've begun working on ways to share the facilities, the building, with activities in the community that are focused on activities that will relate to climate as well as housing needs in the community. There are just numbers of examples. If you are from Michigan or reach out to a Michigan Mission Center or people you know in Michigan, ask them what they're doing. I think there's a lot to be learned from those activities that are going on. And I just had a note from Goba that he is having some connection problems. Scott, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I have found that it's hard to find a electric station for electric cars. I just wonder if there's any work being done on that, and how do we get more electric power stations to actually have the infrastructure for electric cars. I mean, I'm assuming we can talk to our government about that, but is this group doing anything in that realm in terms of trying to get more electric stations for cars?
Sarah, are you aware of any activities within organizations involved in IPL?
Well, we generally try to award congregations that are doing something in that arena through our annual contest, through the EV Leader Award. And so some of those congregations have been lobbying for more EV charging infrastructure. Some are actually contributing by putting up EV charging stations on their own property or in their own communities. And IPL in general we've got a number of sort of advocacy efforts underway through the National Interfaith Power and Light movement around transitioning to an electric vehicle fleet.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kay, your hand is raised, I think. You're still muted, though. Looks like you're still muted. Okay. While we're waiting for you to figure out how to mute, I notice you're on your phone, it looks like. If you can find a way to unmute, we'll take your comment when you can do that. Other comments, other things your congregations or your communities are doing that you'd like to share, or ideas you have you'd like feedback about. Scott again?
Oh, I just noticed in the chat that somebody was asking, I think it was Alice was asking about, do we have any data on life expectancy of batteries for solar panels, and when disposing the batteries, is that in itself a pollute the earth?
Sarah, I don't know if you have any comments about that. I think the question really has to do with that third piece, not only having solar panels and converting to other sources of heat and energy, but also then storage efforts as well, and whether there are challenges with respect to the battery storage issues or the pollution that may occur from their production.
Oh yeah, there's a great deal of concern about batteries for both the rare minerals that go in them, harvesting those rare minerals and the impact that has on the earth, and also recycling these batteries when they come to the end of their useful life. So yeah, IPL just came out with a statement on the minerals for batteries. That we need to do that carefully.
Yeah.
And with restraint, and it needs to be paired with recycling. We need to think of cradle to grave when we create batteries and solar panels as well.
Gary, your hand's raised.
Yes, have you got me there? Right. I'm big land down under here. We don't have such a climate change as what you do in the States and other countries there in the north. We were blessed by having a church member contributor having solar panels fitted to our church. Wonderful thing. I don't know about in the States, but here we get credits for power back into the grid. It's not a big credit, but our last power bill for our church, I think, was $1.50 or something. I had a problem paying that because they would only accept the $2 payment. And so it's interesting. But for myself, and we have solar panels on our home, and it starts with me, like it does with anyone, and starting at home first to reduce power consumption, whatever we can do in ways of doing it, collecting grey water to water gardens. You say water, I have a 1,000-gallon water tank on my garage. It's a separate building to the house. Use that to water gardens, etc. So we're in a little different situation to what you are there in the States and in the Northern Hemisphere. We would rarely have double glazing on windows and things like that because of a more moderate climate. However, yes, and we're a very small congregation, but it's a blessing to have that privilege of having solar panels on our church, and we do strive to reduce it. And we're talking last time about waste and so on. And one of the horrid things I see in this world, our world economies are built on I've lost the word, on inflation, right? And so inflation tells us we have to use more, make more, and that delves into the earth's resources. And so it's just like, for me, a dog chasing its tail. And it's a difficult thing to help then pull that all back. It's a continuing fight as far as I see. And but anyway, look, I won't take up any more of your time. It's delightful to join with you and see some familiar faces there. And just trust that Michael DeMole's on here too from this land. He has contributed to working toward reducing the Earth resources and many other things. You might like to hear from him at some time. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael has put a few things in the chat. I trust Michael will raise his hand if he has things he wants to share with us as well. You know, I know that the track that we've been sort of focusing on today has been really what can congregations do to bring their use of carbon down to a zero level by a certain target date. But you've also touched on broader issues of advocacy and what kinds of things can one do to address the built-in consumption mechanisms that drive us, as you suggest, Gary, to a growth economy as the way that we ought to live. And then we'll have some future sessions, including the one coming up next month, I think, that will touch on those issues. Other things that your congregations are doing or thinking about, or that you'd like feedback about, that relate really to our main theme here of reducing our carbon footprint in congregations. And Rod, I see you raising your hand.
Yes, I can't use the raise function because I'm the host, and that just doesn't work. So just got to do it the old-fashioned way. Question is, in our congregation, we've put in a pollinator garden, and I'd wonder if you could just comment briefly about what one can do with the land around churches.
I think he was addressing that to you, Sarah. Do you have any thoughts about land use owned by congregations? Maybe
Sure.
not directly related to carbon footprint issues, but related matters.
It actually is related. A lot of congregations have a lot of carefully manicured green lawns around them. And the pesticides that we spray on those lawns to keep them that way are big carbon emitters. But the factories the industry that creates the fertilizer and the pesticides, they're big emitters. And then spreading it, that's more emissions right there. And running your gas-powered lawnmowers, that's more emissions there. The watering of these lawns, is that the best use of that water? So, and the other end of the spectrum, a pollinator garden with native plants. Native plants have roots that can go down 8 feet deep. Being from a prairie state, I'm always proud of that, what we used to have. That can help restore the soil so that it can start performing the way it's intended to perform and set carbon from the atmosphere back into the soil. And so planting a pollinator garden with native plants that have long roots actually is very much related to climate change. So, and it's also an easy sell to congregants who don't care so much about climate change, but they like butterflies and pretty flowers. So by all means, that's a really good thing to do.
Does your carbon calculator incorporate those kinds of elements into the calculation?
No, it doesn't.
So there might be a way to create some additional measure of that, so perhaps in the future.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Other observations, comments? We got a few more minutes. Let's see. Kay?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
That took a while. I have a screen I've never seen before, and I was trying to figure out what happened. Just a few comments I'm in Apple Valley, Minnesota. It's one of the 3 Minneapolis congregations. And we recently, well, actually about 3 months ago, organized into committees, one in regard to food and ours in regard to the environment, and another one in regards to social justice. And there are about 10, 11 people in each committee. We have our environmental group has now, next Sunday will be our 3rd meeting, I believe. And we are getting active and activated. And so I don't have much to report now, except that we are getting activated and enough to meet during our potluck next Sunday. And we have already done a number of things with our building. And I think I did mention in another session that as a master gardener, I worked with the congregation when we were adding a big sanctuary that had 185 gallons of rainwater come off of our roofs in a 1-inch rain. And we needed a place for all that water to go that it wouldn't overwhelm the neighborhood and the holding pond that was there. And we have successfully done it. We love to watch the water babble down our dry creek bed and into the garden. It's been there now about 12 years or more, and we need to redo it and to make it more effective and to make sure that we don't have to use the pesticides. So we are working towards zero emissions. We've talked about it. We just have not done the 1, 2, 3 yet.
And there's been mentioned in other.
That's what's happening here.
Thank you, Kay. The notion of getting an energy audit, I think, is a suggestion that if as a first step for congregations to, as well as individuals, to really understand what the opportunities are for reducing carbon emissions. And so I guess I'd encourage all of you in your congregations to, if you haven't already done so, to find out locally what the resources for getting energy audits are that are available to you. Other comments? Dennis, see your hand raised.
There are other forms besides using electric cars to get places, walking, public transport, and there are electric vehicles like bicycles and scooters that if you're not ready to spend the money for a car, you could try something a little, or even just a regular bicycle can get you to a lot of places.
That's right. In my case, I'd need a 3-wheeled electric bike. Otherwise, I'd be tipping over a lot. But I think that's a great suggestion. Other comments before we hand this over to Joan for some closing comments? All right. Well, Joan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I want to take the opportunity, Sarah, to thank you so much. We've had comments in the chat as well, appreciating this presentation and the opportunity to share. And so thank you very much. And, we may be coming back to you at some point in the future for additional advice or contributions or whatever it might be. Joan?
Thanks, Dean. Rod's putting our screen back up. So as we draw our session to a close, we want to spend a few minutes holding up the intersection of mission and climate action. Where might there be opportunities to combine both? Where might we be grasped by big visions of possibilities and dare to dream big? We want to just draw your attention to one example that we're aware of. Approximately 40 years ago, some Community of Christ members in Toronto, Canada, launched a new charitable organization with the purpose of creating not only affordable housing for vulnerable and marginalized persons, but housing that also fostered community. Cyanito will soon be breaking ground on their 4th building. Located in North Toronto, this will provide low-cost and subsidized independent apartments for persons with mental health challenges, primarily seniors. Because one of the biggest challenges for vulnerable people is food. There's food preparation, there's food planning, there's getting to the grocery store, there's getting food home from the grocery store, there's storing it safely, preparing it, cleaning up. Their model employs a common dining room with 3 meals a day, a food service that eliminates all that burden on vulnerable people. At the same time, along with other community spaces and activities, it fosters community and support. So this is already a proven and successful model for Cyanito's buildings. But this time, through intentional planning and the raising of some significant part of, sorry, I missed some. So the raising of some significant additional funding, their plan to build this building to be carbon neutral. And so how are they doing that? One of the things that they're doing is that the cladding on the building will generate electricity. So in the picture you see, you know, all that blue stuff, that's electric generating cladding. It will be the first building in Toronto to use this new material. So some other features that they're putting in, the glass panels on the balcony railings and all of the windows on the building will generate electricity. There'll be heat pump in every unit. They're maximizing the insulation. They're effectively doubling what the building code is asking for in insulation. All of the lighting will be LED, and the entire building will be entirely electric. They're still investigating the option of solar panels on the roof, but even without them, the total utility company energy usage is projected to be only about 20% of what Energy Star buildings would use. So we hope that you will take some time to think, discern, pray, and dream about your local call to action and mission. In our January webinar, we'll be dialoguing together about how to launch some support groups, whatever support groups you need to propel your action vision. But before that, please join us next month when our theme is Advent, Climate, and Nonviolent Action, Igniting Fire in Our Bones. Our guest speakers will be Rachel Ross and Mike Mullins of Great Britain's Christian Climate Action. They'll explore the biblical roots for taking nonviolent direct action for justice. We hope that we'll see you there. So thank you all for participating, and a special thanks to Laura for her passionate work for climate action and her willingness to share her time and experience with us. This concludes our session for today, so feel free to unmute your microphones and visit for a few minutes before you leave.